The sun was already up in the sky by the time Ada managed to remember that he was supposed to be going to the bazaar.
Uh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to arrive so late. Please don't kill me.
But lo and behold, there's no one around.
I'm the first. Wait, now's not the time for that. Aina could get here any.
Ada knew better than to finish that sentence. Sensing a presence behind his back, he turned around slowly.
Boss? I gotcha. You really need to stop sneaking up on people.
Aina pointed at the ground. A few wooden beams were laying next to a sheet dyed a vibrant red.
Right, I know we're supposed to prepare the stall, but you were too rough during yesterday's fight, so I overslept and then I kinda got lost on the way and...
Aina's silent glare told him that she didn't believe a single word, but she didn't care enough to pry either.
Hey, don't look at me like that. You arrived late too.
I just noticed up here at the top right it said Aina added. So I think... Where was it? The encyclopedia. Let's look at the characters. So yeah, Adna Sind, son of Japhaz of the Upperfield, age 22. Aina, no one's actually, don't know how old she is. So we can just check out the characters. And then, what else have we got? Go back. Oh, we got the lore. Check out the lore. Wow, that's some serious lore. There's a lot to go through. Okay, so it's quite well thought out. It's dictionary. What's a sand fur? A slur used to refer to rose. Wow. I don't want to get into no racism. Okay, let's go back. We'll carry on with the story. She pointed at her hair. It was dripping drops of green water.
And how is it my fault that you were busy dyeing your hair?
Leaving him with that perfectly valid question unanswered, she walked back to pick up a big bag she'd left a few steps away. She lifted it up with a single hand and then headed toward the stall, closely followed by Ada. It was about time that they began working. A sudden thought popped up in Ada's mind as he helped her set up the carpet.
So, how come the patron ain't here? Is it gonna be just the two of us today?
Aina simply shrugged.
You won't tell your dad I arrived late, right, boss?
She punched his arm with such strength that she almost made him fall sideways. She doesn't speak much, does she? But her actions speak fairly loudly, so that's alright.
Ow! What did I... Oh, tell. Sorry, boss.
This little reminder that was a sensitive issue effectively killed the conversation. People from all over Ireland began congregating in the bazaar, turning the wall plaza into a sea of spice, trinkets and deer. The currents of that sea were difficult to understand for Ada, who often found himself pushed to the ground in the busiest hours. Today would be especially lively. It was the beginning of the Dawnsoon season, and so the festive Eina had to make sure to bid a proper farewell to the rain clouds so they'd be back by the end of it. A pleasant change from Ada's usual day-to-day, working in Eina's forge under the continuous risk of suffering a heat stroke or third-degree burns. Or that's what he thought at first.
Welcome, welcome! We have the best prices in town! Come see what goods we offer!
There was no reaction whatsoever to his incessant yelling, other than Aina snickering at him for trying so hard.
You're supposed to help out too, you know.
With a long sigh, Aina sat up and cast a tired glance over the carpet. She reached out and grabbed a small, shiny dagger. After checking its sharpness against her gloves, she began stabbing the air as possible customers approached the stall, attempting to showcase its intended use. Ada quickly put his hands over her shoulders, discreetly bringing her arms down.
You know what? I take it back. You're always working really hard. So, just let me take care of this, boss.
Is he just scared of everyone, this guy? He did his best attempt at a natural smile. Aina, who couldn't care less about any of this, simply shrugged and sat back, still wielding the knife. She let her hand fall on one of the stones that paved the bazaar and effortlessly tore it from the ground, deciding it had served better as a sharpening tool.
That's not helping.
The hours passed by slowly and painfully, for they were completely ignored by any passer-by. Well, actually avoided rather than ignored. It was no surprise the merchant, Ada's patron, and his mute daughter were two of the most despised people in the city. In spite of the incredible variety of antiquities and smithery that the merchant had for sale, no one ever bought a single thing. And there were plenty of reasons for that. Even Ada had some serious doubts about working for an old man whose fur was redder than blood, and an albino smith that insisted on dyeing her hair green. The fact that they worked independently from Elam's trader guild probably had something to do with it too. In any case, it was well afternoon, and they hadn't done anything but sit around the whole day. Not going well. Ada pressed his lips together and began drumming his fingers against the floor. Longer, sire. He looked askance at Aina, hoping his subtle call for attention had stirred her curiosity. No answer. You'd have to be the one to actually break the silence as usual.
So, hey, Aina. You know when I said that I arrived late today because I got lost and stuff?
Aina stopped hitting the rock with the blade. She barely moved her eyes toward Ada.
Well, there's more to that. It's because I actually...
Saw a beast, ran through a wall, saw a gazelle. Ooh. Let's go straight for the gazelle. Let's do it.
I saw a gazelle girl, strutting her butt.
Wow, you shouldn't really talk about that to her. I don't think she's gonna like that. Aina's inquisitive gaze suddenly made Ada very curious of his own words and thoughts. Ada was most certainly not used to having to pay attention to him when he spoke.
But ugly face. So I just ran away because she was so awful. Ugh, yeah.
Ada could feel how Aina's lilac eyes stared at his very soul, piercing a hole with a question that she meant to ask. Why, it was such an intense look that he felt flustered. With her usual silent demeanour, Aina brought her two gloved hands in front of her face. She balled them both into a fist, raising just her index fingers. Then she lifted them until they rested on her forehead like tiny horns.
Horns?
With a quick motion, she took her horns to her mouth, biting them.
I'm not a horn eater, damn it! I like does!
Okay, we're going to hit up that dictionary. Horn eater. A slur used to refer to a male deer who shows interest in another male deer, a male or female gazelle, since they both got horns. It's not illegal, but they face heavy social stigma. Okay, so you need to check up on your terminology if all this is going to make sense to you. Alright, let's keep going. Aina had a mean smile on her face and her arms folded over her chest. While her bad temper was known and feared among the other merchants, it was unusual for her to be so acidic, especially towards Ada. Pointed out.
You're acting really weird, boss.
The smile on her face vanished, replaced by a grimace. In response to this affirmation, Aina merely shifted her gaze back to the blade and resumed her task, pretending she hadn't heard him. But if Ada was known for one thing, it was his incessant need to stick his nose into everyone's business. What's wrong?
What's wrong, Aina?
A wrinkle formed over her nose, as she focused on keeping calm, but Ada didn't get the message.
Come on, you know you can tell me anything.
No sooner he'd finished that sentence, Aina slammed the dagger she was sharpening against the ground, effectively sinking its tip into the ground.
Right, I mean, I know you can't tell me, but if you figure out any way you can tell me how you feel,
Aina got up all of a sudden, her face red in anger. Ada was preparing himself mentally for the beating that he expected would ensue, but instead she just plopped down on the ground, sitting with her back against his. Our dear Buck was puzzled to say the least, but Aina didn't even make a sound. She just sat behind him, completely still, and hidden from the public eye. Of course, the possibility of getting whacked in the head was now more real than ever, so Ada didn't even attempt to guess why she'd ever do that.
what was the patron thinking?
Well, he probably didn't expect you two to play, hide and seek in the stall.
Who's this dude? He's huge. Ada and Aina immediately jumped away from each other, doing their worst best attempt at looking half professional. The thunderous laugh resonated over the ruckus of the bazaar.
Heel grab?
Ill grab.
It's respectable Illigrab Buntalos to you, boy.
Wow.
But please, don't hold back on my account. I'll just look the other way.
What?
Who's this? And so appeared the man that was so red that it would seem he'd stolen all the colour his daughter was lacking.
Patron?
Ah, so he gets the respectful treatment and I don't. I see how it is.
What's that salacious doll cop doing to my daughter now?
They're just strengthening their ties of friendship. Ah, or is this a budding love?
The merchant shook his cane. hitting Illigrab's twiggy leg with a loud thunk. The tree man just wiggled his moustache in response.
Whoa, wait! We weren't doing anything, patron.
That's the problem, you cumberground! You lighter sack! You...
A coughing fit saved Ada from more old-timey insults which he could barely comprehend. Once he'd recovered, though, the merchant put his bearded face next to Ada's, resting the tip of his cane on Ada's chest. He opened his toothless mouth slowly, his breath reeking more like bleach than liquor.
You haven't sold a single thing, have you?
Nope.
Now, that's hardly their fault, Red.
I'm sure this Yeltsin was just frolicking with my daughter as usual!
She's old enough to frolic as she pleases.
She hasn't even come of age yet!
Of course she hasn't. There's no way for her to pass that right.
Of course there is! She just needs to open her mouth and stop being an idiot!
She's getting pissed off. Look at this face. She's not happy.
She's mute, patron.
I wish that rub off on you! And maybe you'd learn to keep your mouth shut when adults are talking!
Dude got no chill.
I did pass the coming of age right. I'm an adult too.
Shut up! Don't you have anything to say about this, insolent child? Aina?
She walked away while you two were arguing.
Then why didn't you say so sooner, you overgrown sapling?
She looked like she needed it.
This is all your fault! And yours!
He stabbed Ada's nose with the tip of his finger.
Mine?
That stupid child's been acting up since you first arrived!
Don't blame the poor boy. She's always had an attitude, and you know it.
I don't care! You two better go bugger off somewhere else! Or I swear to Arab that I'll hit you so hard that you'll be cropping out your teeth for a week!
Oh my god. Oh, I like the bugger off. That's some nice British swearing. I like that. That's good. Both Ada and Illigrab winced at that. No shit. Ada seemed about to complain, so Illigrab didn't hesitate.
Come on, Adder. Those two clearly want some alone time. And he'll have plenty of that when I leave him tied to the pyre next time I find a mob outside the shop.
Illigrab took Ada by the cape and lifted him off the ground as they walked away. It didn't take Illigrab long to notice Ada's unusual reticence to speak.
Please, don't let Red's words affect you. He's, worse today. There's a storm coming from the west, and it's making us old people nervous.
Nah, I don't get too bothered by what the patron says. I mean, I don't cry anymore, at least. I guess I'm just worried. Aina's been acting weird today, too. Maybe she's afraid of storms. I need to find her and make sure she's okay.
Illigrab didn't reply to the last affirmation. He placed Ada carefully on the ground and patted his cape to straighten it.
Well, in that case, I have to go back to keeping watch on the fair. So, this is where we say goodbye for the day. Hey, I'll send someone to fetch you if I see her, okay?
Ada nodded resolutely. They waved goodbye to each other. And then the buck just stood there, wondering where to start looking, when the bazaar was half a league from gate to gate. Assuming she was still in the bazaar at all, that is.
Finally! I thought that fluffy bastard was never leaving.
Was it Guyoff or was it Jeff? I don't know. Guyoff walked into the scene with a huge smile as the giant disappeared in the distance.
Afternoon, Mr. Bard.
Oh, lad, what a face. Not a word. Thy mien speaketh clearer than thy tongue doeth. You're hungry.
I'm not in the...
Well, I am. And I can't play a song when my stomach's growling a gazelle. Let's get some fried leaves.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Bard, but I don't have time for that. I'm looking for Aina. Patron was saying mean stuff, so she ran away all angry. And I've got to make sure she's okay.
And I thought my songs were monothematic.
Garth picked the strings of his oud one by one, deep in thought, while Ada just paced around.
I know just the place to look.
Garth expertly snuck through the crowds, moving with such ease that he seemed to be little more of a shadow. Ada did his best to keep up with him, though that was hardly an easy task when he was one head taller than most other deer. The place Garth was looking for wasn't in the plaza itself, surrounded by stalls and all their merchandise, but rather in one of the many alleys that led to the bazaar. The crowd there was bustling with life as well, but not quite in the same manner. They were all rowdy deer, pushing and cheering. Is it a Kanmei alley? Kanmei alleys were very different from the official sort. While killing was still very much frowned upon, there was no chivalry, no one set of rules. There was no way of knowing if the horns you were being gored with were hygienic. There were punches and kicks and all sorts of cheats. It was chaos. And for that and several other reasons, Aina was a huge fan of unofficial Kanmei. Sadly, as much as Ada jumped and pushed and yelled, she wasn't anywhere to be found.
Alas, your fair maiden is in another alley.
Ada cast a long glance over the impoverished battlegrounds, attempting to find her one last time.
Not too bad. Aina'd kicked some serious ass here.
Good thing she's not allowed to fight.
Yeah, they wouldn't let a doe fight.
A golem at her.
Garth cast a very serious look in his direction. This wasn't the first time they had this discussion, and it wouldn't be the last.
Aina is not a golem, okay? She's a doe. It's just she's
Albino.
a bit of a weirdo.
Wow.
Weirdo. Right. Tell me, Adder dearest, how many albino does can you name off the top of your head that can lift your heavy butt with just one hand?
Aina! Now let's go, we have to find her!
Why do I even bother? Look at her. Golem or not, she's just a little cabbage head hiding in the crowds of this enormous city. She's damn good at hiding. And do you know why people hide?
'Cause they don't want to be found.
Garth extended his arms toward him in a dramatic manner, remarking how correct he was.
You're not gonna find her. So why don't you go and use your thick skull for something useful? Like bringing us money so we can have dinner for once.
Garth pointed at the ring with his horns, and Ada knew better than to insist. With a heavy sigh, Ada nodded and began walking toward the ringmaster.
Ah, wait, there's just one more thing. Your bag of coins. You wouldn't want to lose what little we have to the hands of, say, some ill-intentioned crook, now would you?
Yeah.
Garth extended his hand a bit too keenly, waiting for Ada to find the purse he'd usually hid within his sash. However,
I think I...
Don't tell me you lost it.
Okay.
Garth's scrawny body trembled like a branch about to snap off.
Just go. Alright. See that sweaty blackhead over there with the glistening fur and that charming smile? That's your foe. I'll go place my bet now. Are you feeling like a winner, ladder?
Charming? Wait, you mean the guy with the sharpened horns? Bart, I don't think I'm ready for this!
What?
What if he hits me in the face? I already lost an eye, and I don't want to go blind like the merchant.
Then do enlighten me, my boy, on how in the name of the Hatsa do you pretend to become a knight if you can't handle even a rat pointed at you? No wonder you can't even catch a hint, yellow piece of mangy. Sorry about that.
Yeah, you gotta keep that temper under control, mate.
What?
I said I'm going to walk you through this. So oh help me three if you mess up.
Hey, let this dough in. And a girl who sure eat your veggies. And all sticks on your forehead, I can't fool anyone.
If he's serious, this is gonna be easier than I thought.
Sorry folks, I couldn't manage to make the battle minigame work properly for the demo. Accept these chippies as an apology, and let us pretend this never happened. So here's your chippy artwork, and let's pretend we had a mini battle game. Yay.
Woo! I'm alive! What I win? What I win?
I completely forgot to place the bet.
Garth covered his face with his hands, making some sort of intelligible noise that can only be described as the very sound of anger.
Hey, Big Ed, I want to learn some tips too. I'll buy you dinner.
Hey, he's my manager!
Garth shut Ada's snout with one hand.
My dear boy, you sure gave it all today. Why don't you go and enjoy what's left of the fair? I have a gig in the tavern later. Money, yes. Don't expect me tonight.
With that, Garth hardly shooed, very confused, Ada away. Without any friends, or anything even remotely similar to hang out with, Ada dragged his feet around the bazaar. He had missed most of the events, and after the fight he was acutely aware of just how empty his stomach was. Ada considered that his best bet was merely walking around until he got tired, and then head home to sleep the hunger off until Aina brought him some food the next day. That is, if Aina was coming back of her own volition. Then again, he'd never seen her miss a single day of work.